Thank you, Mukesh. I want to start by stealing some thoughts from my colleague Vinod, who, while introducing John Chambers and Keith Krog, has said this is a fanboy moment for him. This couldn't get any bigger for me. To have Raj, Chief Operating Officer FedEx, and Shantanu, CEO of Adobe, the opportunity to spend the next 30 minutes talking about leadership with you guys, not just for me, but all of the startups who are watching us live on YouTube, Shantanu and Raj, and many business leaders. This is truly a unique opportunity, and I know it was not easy to find time for both of you, but thank you for giving us the priority and an opportunity today. The amazing thing about both of you, for some of us startup founders to learn, with Raj spending 28 years at FedEx and Shantanu, you with 21 years at Adobe, that's a lesson in itself in perseverance that most of us startup founders, with our short attention span, etc., need to learn from you. My own mentor, John, is another one, just like yourself, on it. In the morning, Shantanu and Raj, we had the Indian ambassador and also Keith in conversation with John. And through the morning, we've heard that how this is a new normal. Even the time you spent with the 5 CEOs in preparation for this session, you both alluded to how FedEx and Adobe are now adjusting to this new normal, new product innovations, work adjustments, work from home, etc. One of the things that's emerged in consensus is the engine of job creation is less likely to be the large businesses, but more likely to be the startup engine in both countries. Also, personally, I founded my own startup, Uniphore, in 2008. So founding the company from one recession to coming here, my own life lesson has been that one learns most in these events. You learn how to be nimble and adjust. So with that, I want to open your thoughts in terms of how, as business leaders, startup leaders, government leaders, need to think about first tackling and blocking the current situation. And as we get out of it, how do we think ahead and prepare ourselves for the new normal and the new growth? If I were to start with coming to each one of you, starting with you, Raj, both your thoughts on what we are seeing right now, and from as a champion of the US-India ties, what role would you see startups playing in furthering these ties between the two countries?
Well, thank you, Umesh. And again, it's great to be here. And I know I've been in FedEx for 28 years, and I've never actually found a reason to leave. And if somebody had told me when I joined this company that I would be here doing this 28 years from then, I thought I had a better chance of playing in the Indian cricket team. But such as it is, this turned out to be a very exciting venture for me. So now, in terms of you talked about preparing. Yeah, it's a lot of effort and attention. Right now, we're fighting this pandemic war, and we find ourselves in the front lines of this war. But however, there are, at the same time, we also putting in place things that we need to prepare for the peace that comes afterwards. So, a lot of judgment has to come into play here and figure out where some of the markers might lie, and then start to or move rapidly towards that direction. And hopefully judgment is right. And in many cases, as I said in the previous conversation, we were already skating to where the puck was going to be, but the puck came at us in a more rapid fashion than we thought. So I think there's a lot of opportunity for innovation here, and especially as in our position, we are definitely looking at the intersection of physical and digital spaces and trying to figure out how we really take that forward in the technological advancement in this time frame. And that's where startups play a significant role, because usually startups are much more innovative, they're much faster, and big companies have the brand and the scale, and I think that's where the opportunity to connect. And India is a fantastic place right now in terms of having the right skill set to bring that to the fore. You just have to look in this call and in the previous conversation we had. It's very exciting folks who are bringing new things to the table and have the opportunity to scale up working with large companies hand in hand to provide that value. So that's where I think the startup community can be a superb bridge between U.S. and India. And as the world political dynamics are changing, the U.S.-India relationship is going to get stronger. It's even it's going to get much stronger. And I think startups play a huge role, especially in aiding innovation and speed to market for large companies.
Thank you, Raj, for your thoughts. Shantanu, similar thoughts on dealing with the current pandemic and the financial crisis and the role you see startups playing in US-India ties?
Well, first, Umesh, like Raj, I just wanted to thank all of you for having Raj and me on this session today. It's actually been a privilege to participate in what Mukesh and John have done, which is actually the creation of a new startup to really drive, even more significant ties between the U.S. and India. And so I just first want, I'd be remiss if I didn't acknowledge John and Mukesh's efforts to do this. So thank you for having me. I think as it relates to the importance of startups, there's no question that the lifeblood of any country is new venture creation. And last time I checked, Umesh, every business starts as a $0 billion business. And so, startups are truly the lifeblood of an economy. And anything that people can do to foster startups through events like this will only appeal not just to the US economy, but also to the Indian economy. So I wanted to say that. I think from my perspective, if you're a startup, a crisis is a terrible thing to waste. I mean, we all realize we're going through unprecedented times, but unprecedented times are actually the best times for disruption. And so whether you're a large company like Raj at FedEx or me at Adobe, or whether you're a small company, everything is up in the air. How people engage with customers is up in the air. How distance learning happens is going to be up in the air. Supply chains up in the air. AI is up in the air. And so I think, for us at Adobe, what we're really thinking about during this pandemic is first to acknowledge that these are unprecedented times, to certainly focus on our employees first and foremost, because they are the intellectual capital that we have in a company. But then to really start to look around the corner and imagine the possibilities of what this pandemic is going to create in terms of new opportunities, because we are not going to go back to the old normal, whether it's how you work, whether it's how you shop, whether it's how you consume entertainment, whether it's how you travel. And so I think those are going to represent, Umesh, just very, very significant opportunities. And what startups have always demonstrated is resiliency and a nimbleness. And so I think we are trying to, frankly, we talk about bringing Sandhill Road, which for those of you in the Bay Area know is sort of the hotbed of venture creation in this country. If we can bring that to Adobe and foster that kind of nimbleness and looking around the corner, this is just one of those unique opportunities in time.
Excellent. Picking up from both of your thoughts, as Raj said, this is a great opportunity for innovation, and Shantanu, you reiterated that this is an opportunity not worth missing. As I think about what's happening, say at a smaller scale with my customers, and we do artificial intelligence and call centers for enterprises, and most of my customers who I'd say were fence sitting on digitization, AI, automation, are now finding themselves having to accelerate some of those journeys and making that their new normal. So maybe Shantanu, starting with you, and then Raj, I'll come to you, but Shantanu, both within Adobe and how you're rethinking, positioning some of your products or the stack that gets put out in the marketplace. What are the trends you're seeing in terms of digitization, especially the impact that COVID is having on large enterprises thinking about, artificial intelligence, automation, etc.?
The conversation that's happening in not just corporate America, but corporations all around the world is following a couple of different vectors, Umesh. The first vector is around employee well-being, and we touched on that in the last session. and how you can make employees productive at home. I mean, whether it's what we are engaging in right now, which is video conferencing and other technologies that enable the employees to be productive. I think that's a massive trend, and Adobe has certainly created a trend which allows people to work from home. But this notion of making employees productive when they are not all physically together in the same location, I think that's going to represent a whole bunch of opportunities. You're certainly seeing whether it's Microsoft Teams or Slack or what we provide with Adobe PDF and Acrobat, a whole bunch of opportunities to engage and make people more productive. So I think that's one big theme. The second big theme is then, because that physical connectivity that corporations relied on to engage with customers is not going to go back to being just a physical engagement, but is going to be increasingly digital. How do you engage with your customers digitally? How do you create that personalized experience? How do you create a business model, perhaps, that's a subscription-based business model that gives you more resiliency in times of these economic duress? And so I think, these two big trends that we see, first with respect to employees, and then, that cuts across different sectors, because whether that's telemedicine or education for employees, or then engagement with customers, those are two that are particularly near and dear to our heart. And the third one I would talk about is, Adobe has certainly been known as one of the companies that's fostered creativity. And a lot of people talk about engaging and making people productive, but the world without creativity would be a really boring place. And we're really focused a lot on wherever inspiration strikes. How can you be more creative, more campaigns? We're all being entertained more within the confines of our house. And so those are three trends that are particularly close to what we stand for as a company and our purpose. And that's maybe the last thing I would say, going back to your purpose as a company and saying, given what your purpose or mission is, how do these provide tailwinds? I think that's where companies capitalize on the current situation.
Excellent. Raj, as you and I have recently spoken about how the shift in business more towards e-commerce at FedEx and digitization, etc. What are the trends from a FedEx experience? And you touch almost every business in the world. What are you seeing out there?
So I think, in terms of digitization in particular, that's a key strategy going forward, is how we figure, we're seeing a lot of data, as well as supply chain data around the world. Talking about startups, our founder chairman, he talked about information about the package being as important as the package itself. That's not profound today, but he said that in 1979. And that invented tracking and tracing. When the internet came along, we were the first application on the internet. And that DNA is with us. So we have a very strong technological background. It's time to really get FedEx 2.0. And looking at the network effects of our physical networks and network effects of our data. So especially on supply chain, we're seeing a lot of information at the customer level, at an aggregate level, that we can create a lot of value for our customers and indeed all our stakeholders. So that's one set. The other thing that is going really fast now is e-commerce. I mean, we were investing ahead of this trend, and what we're supposed to see in 3 years happened in a matter of 3 weeks. And we're not going backwards. There may be some fallback, but it's not going to go back to where it was. And to put it in perspective, in the United States, 15% of retail was e-commerce pre-COVID. In April, that number moved to 25%. It's a step change, and I think it's going to fall somewhere in that space. And so it's going to be it's going to be huge. Now the thing here is, our traditional customers are B2B customers, and they are small, medium, and large businesses, and there are about 20 or 30 million of them in the U.S. and different numbers globally. But the consumers, 300 million. So there's a 10x factor that we have to now deal with the consumers who are not our customers. They're really our customers, but they're a huge influencer in the way we interact. And the only answer to do this is technology. That is the only way that we are able to scale that 10x. And so we are doing a lot of things. We have something called FedEx Delivery Manager, which is, over the last 6 weeks, we've seen millions of new registrants into that system and platform. and we're putting forward new things. So the world is changing rapidly in front of us, and we know for sure that technology and digital innovation and data are the hallmarks for success in the future.
Umesh, if I may just add to what Raj said, because it spurred a thought. I mean, as you know, we were one of the first companies to completely disrupt ourselves and move from selling boxes to selling software completely through a subscription-based business. And what Raj said, I think, is really profound, which is we have created a culture where everything is based on data. We call it our data-driven operating model. And I think the importance of data and the importance of storytelling for startups, where if you're not using the data of how your customers are dealing with you, and that is only enabled by digital, as Raj said, I think you're going to be disadvantaged and you're operating blind. And so I think this importance of data and how you think about data as an asset, much like you would think about a physical building or anything else, and how do you put that interaction with a customer on your balance sheet, I think is a very powerful idea.
This is exactly where I want to go next, Shantanu. What I've heard from both of you in the last few minutes is that even at your scales over these years, you've had a couple of moments where you've had to, say, pivot the direction of the company, pivot some cultural aspects. I'm sure Adobe didn't have a strong data culture from the inception, but over time, you pivoted. The shift, Shantanu, in your case, from the license model of selling to software as a service. True story, every time I've raised a round of funding, I use your public market valuation to negotiate how we should be valued as well. So it's been a great case study of how it should be done. As all startup founders, some find themselves having to make a hard pivot in COVID, and some just for evolution as the next stage of growth, as companies go from, say, Series B, C to go pre-IPO and then IPO, there are new evolutions. As leaders of large organizations, how do you prepare your teams, your companies, for a shift change in say, things that people may have been used to for many years, and now you're asking them to do something new? Shantanu, your thoughts first, and then I'll come back to your Raj as well.
Well, first, Umesh, if you've been using Adobe to get increased valuations, I still haven't seen my commission, but I'm sure the check is coming through a FedEx package to my house. So, we'll have that one. Just a couple of quick thoughts, Umesh. I mean, the first one is that in technology, more so than anywhere else, every business is an S-curve. And if you don't recognize that preserving the status quo is not a business strategy, you're just, delusional. And so I think, for all leaders, recognizing that we want them to be creators and not custodians is, I think, one of the ways culturally that we are trying to create this notion of the expectation for a leader is you're going to look around the corner and you're going to try and disrupt yourself before somebody else disrupts you, because everybody who's attending this session is probably looking at FedEx and Adobe and Cisco the way John created it and said, how do I get a piece of that pie? And so I think recognizing that businesses have this natural evolution in an S-curve. The power in organizations tend to be where you're making the money today, but the future sometimes is in those new and nascent businesses. So I think having that culture of recognizing that things are going to change, and a culture of experimentation and intellectual curiosity. And I think people do what Raj and John and what we inspect, people look at that, not what we expect. And so if you inspect new businesses, if you send the message that it's okay to experiment, if you send the message that, we want people to try different things, that's how you create this culture of innovation. Because I always say, while Raj and I are more cricket fans, I would say, than baseball fans, in baseball, you go to the Hall of Fame batting 300. So you fail 7 times out of 10. And if you can create a culture where you're allowing people that freedom, that luxury, that expectation to experiment, I think that's how you create a culture which continuously reinvents itself.
Yeah. So let me just Yeah, let me add to what Shantanu just said. First of all, I've been talking to Shantanu for many, many years. And when I think we were doing the very first conversation is when he recounted basically what he had done with Adobe. And that is one of the most stunning pivots of corporate history. I think it's incredible. So there's a lot I've learned from him over the years, and how to think completely differently. So it's just been fascinating to watch. And then as Adobe has gone from success to success. And when we sit, in our field here is, it's just it's interesting how when I talk to a lot of students and universities and so on and so forth, how people take for granted the movement of atoms around the world, and the movement of bits and bytes. Now that's very sexy. Somehow, picking a package from or any freight or whatever from any part of the world and depositing it in any other part of the world in a matter of 1 or 2, 3 business days, that seems to be that's table stakes, or that's something that you can do. You can do it. I guarantee you that's very difficult to do. And but somehow we have to tell our story very, very differently, and then figure out the value that we can create again at the space or the atoms and the bits and bytes. So we in terms of how to do it, is what your question was. I think Shantanu had said it very well. I mean, we have to find create that vision, and then find leaders in the organization who can take that vision forward. You may have to try a few times and find, but once you find the right structure, the right organization construct, then you got to go, and you just have to back them. And that's what we have done here, especially in the last year or so, is just really let them go and try to operate like a startup within a big business, and not to constrain them with all kinds of rules and regulations. Because here the opportunities between the interstitial spaces in collaboration, trying to look across industries, and we're going to find new value, and you've got to let the folks, and especially new folks, come into the organization, think differently. And all you can do as a leader at that point is remove barriers for execution. So I think Shantanu said it very well. I'm just adding on to what he said.
Well, one cool idea for change here could be to think about a Memphis versus Silicon Valley cricket match, that you both can be the captains of your respective teams, and we can dream to have it in the coming months. Shifting gears, absolutely, I would love to be the referee of that match. I'm shifting gears on the related topic. How important to both of you, and how much time do you spend on the topic of culture, both in the current times and in general, just as CEO and COO of two of the largest businesses that we know on earth? How much of your mental focus goes towards thinking, worrying about culture?
So let me go first on this one. I mean, culture is a very core thing for FedEx. From the very get-go, especially with the founder chairman, the culture of people first has been very much in the books of FedEx, and it's not something that you can discover. Suddenly, you want to start a new culture. It's been over the years it's been built up. And what has come true, especially in this pandemic, is those investments in culture have paid off brilliantly. There's a whole mission of, when we're delivering these packages, 500,000 people around the world, and moving all these healthcare equipment and products and test kits and everything else, there's this core notion of this is who we are and this is what we do. And so there's a whole this hashtag FedEx Strong. It's like it's really amazing how it is pervaded through the organization. So to answer your question directly, culture is really number one in our books. Especially in a service business like FedEx, it's hearts and minds of our folks. That's the most important. They are our number one priority. And the difference between 500,000 people doing just what it takes not to get fired, versus doing whatever it takes to really go above and beyond the call of duty. That's the difference between success and failure. So for us, culture is all paramount. Eat strategy for breakfast any day.
Raj said it perfectly, Umesh. And all of us as companies, what you aspire to is having a mission or a purpose about what you want to accomplish, But again, he said it beautifully. It's about how you do it that really dictates whether you're going to be successful. I, I think just adding to one point that Raj said, it's at times like this when people truly understand and appreciate were those words on a piece of paper, or do you believe them, and what's your authentic way of dealing with it? And so your actions at a time like this, Umesh, speak more than anything that you might have said. And I think the great companies will recognize that culture really is the way that you make it tick. And so for all the leaders who are listening, every one of your employees is looking at you even more right now as to how you behave, because this is a time of crisis. It's easy to talk about all of this when things are going swimmingly. And so I'd encourage all of you to write down what's important and make sure that you live those values because people observe it.
That's a great lesson for all of us who are running our own businesses and companies. But trying to bring it home, last two questions, now getting hyper focused on startups. As I spoke of the altruistic capitalism mission that all of us startup founders have. Uh, First, the conundrum that has faced most startup CEOs for a while, that when we are building products or services, we tend to find partnership opportunities with larger companies, but it's always been this mismatch of 30-40 billion versus 30-40 million. Is it even worth it? And what advice would you give a hyper growth startup CEO? Is it even worth it for them to spend time? And if it is, then what's the right way?
Raj?
What? I'm sorry. What's spending time on what? I didn't follow the question
On a
correctly.
partnership with a larger company, between a startup and a larger company.
Well, my answer is of course yes, because I think especially right now, I think all companies now are looking for new ways. And as Shantanu said earlier, this is the opportunity for disruption. This is the opportunity that minds are open and they're looking for different ways to do things. And here's where startups provide a lot of energy. And I think one of the points that Shantanu said earlier is very important, that you've got to get to the right place in the organization where this is going on. And so that'll be the trick. And that's not easy. I'm not by any stretch of imagination downplaying that, but if you do find it, and you find the areas and you provide the value, and then there's an opportunity to grow together in a win-win, where the big companies can provide you the scale and you can provide the technology and the speed to market. And it's just there's a place that can happen. So sometimes it may feel more frustrating dealing with a larger company, but if you find the right approach, you find the right breakthrough, I think it's a win-win for all concerned.
I agree. Just adding to what Raj said, I mean, large companies bring the scale, but to Raj's point, the entrepreneur has to do the heavy lifting of recognizing first that it's not a panacea just being associated with a larger company. You have to do the work of saying, how can you really truly help the larger company? From a large company perspective, we see the nimbleness, the can-do attitude, and the ability to completely pivot at the overnight as very attractive from a startup, and sometimes it serves as a catalyst to really say what's happening in this next generation of technology. So again, to Raj's point, there's enthusiasm and interest on our part, but as a startup you have to recognize that it is perhaps a little bit more work because you have to navigate these larger companies, but the payoff can be large if you truly understand how your technology, your people, your service benefits a larger company in addition to yourself. But put yourselves first, because that's what you need to do as a startup.
Thank you for those thoughts, Shantanu and Raj. My final question in closing to both of you. Both of you are board members of USISPF. We've just launched the USISPF Startup Connect program, and I read out the mission. The mission for us is defining US and India as the most important partnership of 21st century, driven by startups. Now, most of us startup CEOs are driven, and we get to work every day because we know how to punch way above our weight. And that's how our companies just somehow don't die and keep growing until we reach your scales. If you were to be, dreamers with me, give me, in your words, a big, hairy, uh, ambitious goal, a BHAG, for the startup program between US and India.
Well, first as an... Go ahead, Raj. No, please.
Okay. All right. Let me just say this, that, first of all, on the USISPF, the work that we are doing, we set up a goal, the trade between US and India is somewhere in the $100 billion range. There's, given everything that's going on in the world right now, there is absolutely no reason why that trade could not be 5 or 10x that number. But it's remained a dream for a long time. But there is a unique opportunity here for really the collaboration at various levels, from people to governments, from businesses to government, to get that. And startups are the catalyst to make it happen, especially given the strengths that we are talking about here. So maybe a goal here is that a startup like yours, as part of this community, becomes a $100 billion startup in the next 5 years. Startup goes from startup to somewhere in that range. Why not? Why not think big in terms of a startup from this kind of atmosphere? Rise up to very big heights in terms of opportunities.
I think when I reflect on history, and very famously, when the internet first came along and Tom Friedman wrote about the fact that the world was flat, I thought we clearly witnessed the birth of incredible set of companies that crossed the US-India, border, whether it was Infosys or TCS or Cognizant. That entire services. I think all of us as companies in the pandemic are even more recognizing that there will be perhaps deglobalization, but this war for talent, irrespective of where it is, can only help both economies, the US economy and the Indian economy. So I think it's a perfect time, with technology disruption and with an acceptance that work can happen anywhere, to create, frankly, that next generation of innovation that fosters both the US economy and the Indian economy. And I hope that, through the initiative that the innovators will demonstrate, with the support from the USISPF, we will create, as Raj said, that next set of 8 or 10 companies that 10 years from now, 20 years from now, we will highlight as absolutely, world-moving companies. So good luck.
Shantanu and Raj, first, I love the goal that you're setting for us. What it also does, without you realizing, I at least have one of my board members, John Chambers, keenly listening in, and you made my next board meeting a very interesting one with this new goal. So thank you for that. But I'm so honored that both of you have taken the time today to interact with all of us, and I hope to, without being, and being very respectful of your time, I hope to continue to seek your advice as we scale up this startup program and create those next 8 to 10 world-leading companies. Thank you. Thank you for your time today.